William Smith, leave the packet alone and step back from the scanner.
I'm not hiding anything.
This is William Smith, the man who kept the books for one of Detroit's most beloved civic projects. For nearly 12 years, those books were a lie, and the FBI has the originals to prove it.
I was just closing a month-end file.
The statements sent out didn't match the real balances.
That's not alteration. That's an accounting timing issue, and you know.
He would not talk his way out of this one, not with a decade of doctored bank statements sitting inside a federal warehouse, not with wire transfer records tracing $24.4 million to a company that existed only on paper, not with a leased Maserati in the driveway and a yacht floating in a marina paid for by donations meant to build a public park. By the end of the summer, William A. Smith, the trusted chief financial officer of the Detroit Riverfront Conservancy, would stand in federal court and admit to draining more than $40 million from one of the most beloved civic projects in Michigan history. 19 years in federal prison, $44 million in restitution, almost 12 years of theft, and every single dollar had been meant for the riverfront. Before we go any further, I want to ask you something. If one person controls every dollar going in and every dollar going out of a nonprofit, who exactly is watching them? Drop your answer in the comments, and if you're new to this channel, hit subscribe. We cover cases the mainstream press buries, and this one will make your blood boil. William Allen Smith was born in the summer of 1972 in Livonia, Michigan, a middle-class suburb of Detroit shaped by the auto industry. His father worked as a mid-level supply chain manager for a Ford parts vendor. His mother taught 4th grade at a public elementary school. The family lived in a 3-bedroom colonial on a cul-de-sac lined with maples, and by every account, they were the kind of neighbors who mowed the lawn on Saturday mornings and hosted 4th of July cookouts with folding chairs pulled onto the driveway. Bill, as everyone called him, was a quiet kid. Teachers described him in report cards as polite, attentive, and unusually strong in mathematics. A 5th grade teacher wrote that he processed numerical relationships intuitively and showed promise for advanced work. By middle school, he was tutoring classmates in pre-algebra during lunch periods for extra credit. Numbers were the language he spoke fluently. Words came harder. At Livonia Franklin High School, he ran cross-country, played JV basketball for 1 season, and joined the accounting club as a sophomore. He worked summers at a Meijer grocery store, first bagging and then behind the customer service counter, counting cash drops. His manager remembered him as the only kid on the roster who actually enjoyed reconciling the till at close. He graduated in 1990 and enrolled at Central Michigan University on a partial academic scholarship, majoring in accounting. He finished in 4 years with a 3.7 grade point average. He passed all 4 sections of the CPA exam on his first attempt at age 23, which put him in the top 15% of first-time takers in the state that year. His first job was at a mid-sized Detroit accounting firm called Remen Robson, where he worked in the audit division auditing small nonprofits and municipal utility districts. He was efficient, deferential to partners, and known for staying late without complaint. Within 6 years, he had made senior manager. His performance reviews from that period used phrases like meticulous attention to detail, demonstrates strong client service instincts, and consistently produces clean, defensible work product. He married a woman named Christine in 1998. She worked as a pharmaceutical sales representative for a company that sold cardiac medications. They bought a starter home in Plymouth, Michigan, then upgraded a few years later to a larger house in Northville. They had 2 sons, born in 2001 and 2003. On paper, the Smith family was the picture of suburban Detroit success. 2 cars, good schools, a finished basement, season tickets to a middling college football program. In 2007, he left public accounting to become the assistant controller at a mid-sized Michigan manufacturing company. He stayed there for 4 years and was promoted to controller in 2009. Then, in early 2011, a headhunter called him about a role that would change everything. The Detroit Riverfront Conservancy, a rising nonprofit tasked with transforming 5.5 miles of decaying industrial waterfront into public parkland, was looking for its next chief financial officer. The founding CFO was retiring. The organization needed someone reliable, someone who understood municipal finance and nonprofit accounting, someone who would grow with the mission. Bill Smith interviewed 3 times. He impressed the board with his fluency in fund accounting, his easy manner with donors, and what one board member later called the calm competence of a man who has clearly done this before. He was hired in the fall of 2011 with a starting salary of $160,000, a full benefits package, and a corner office overlooking the very river he had been hired to help redevelop. He was 39 years old. He had a wife, 2 young sons, a home in Northville, a spotless CPA record, and a career that seemed to be entering its prime. Within 13 months, he would open a shell company called the Joseph Group and begin quietly draining the accounts of the very nonprofit that had trusted him with everything. To understand what William Smith did, you have to understand what the Detroit Riverfront Conservancy was and what it meant to the people who paid for it. For decades, the Detroit River shoreline had been closed off to the public. It was a wall of concrete grain silos, rusting cement plants, abandoned rail yards, and chain-link fences topped with barbed wire. Detroiters could see the river from a highway overpass, but they could not walk to it. They could not sit beside it. They could not fish in it, jog along it, or push a stroller down a path beside it. The river that had defined the city geographically had been walled off from the city physically for the better part of a century. The Conservancy was founded in 2003 with a mission to change that. The plan was to build a continuous river walk, eventually stretching 5.5 miles, with parks, plazas, playgrounds, kayak launches, and public gathering spaces along the way. The Kresge Foundation, based in nearby Troy, Michigan, pledged $50 million as a founding gift. The state contributed. The city contributed. Corporate donors from General Motors to DTE Energy contributed. And thousands of ordinary Detroit residents contributed too, in gifts ranging from $25 to $25,000. The Kresge Foundation had a specific condition attached to its money. Its $50 million would be paid out over years, in tranches, matched dollar for dollar by other donations. Every dollar the Conservancy raised from the community was matched by Kresge. So when a family in East English Village mailed in a $100 check, the Conservancy actually received $200. When a Detroit Steelworkers local donated $50,000, it became $100,000. Every donation was a bet. Every donation was leveraged. Every dollar mattered twice. By 2011, when Smith walked through the front door as the new CFO, the Conservancy was managing tens of millions of dollars in restricted and unrestricted funds. It had a staff of about 20. It had a board of directors drawn from Detroit's civic and philanthropic elite. And it had, critically, a very small internal finance team. The finance department consisted of Bill Smith, a part-time bookkeeper, and an outside accounting firm that prepared the annual audited financials. That was it. The bookkeeper handled routine accounts payable. The outside auditors reviewed year-end statements. And Smith, as CFO, had sole signatory authority on the Conservancy's bank accounts, sole login credentials to the online banking portal, and sole responsibility for reconciling monthly statements before handing them to the bookkeeper. He was, in the parlance of internal auditors, a segregation of duties nightmare. One person controlling the money, controlling the records, and controlling the reconciliation of the two. The board trusted him. He was a CPA. He had 13 years of clean public accounting experience. He was recommended by search consultants. He was polite and articulate at board meetings. He answered questions clearly. He looked people in the eye. And the Conservancy was growing so fast, so publicly, so successfully, that no one thought to ask whether the person keeping the books might be inventing them. The first fraudulent transfer went out on November 14, 2012. $50,000 wired from a Conservancy operating account at Chase Bank to an account at another Michigan bank held in the name of the Joseph Group, Inc. The Joseph Group had been registered as a Michigan corporation the previous month at a mailbox rental in Novi. It had no employees, no office, no website, no goods, no services. The sole shareholder and sole officer was William A. Smith. The wire transfer memo read, "Consulting Services, Waterfront Development Strategy." There was no consulting. There was no strategy. The Joseph Group existed for exactly one purpose. It was a bank account with a name on it, and Bill Smith owned both. He waited 3 weeks. Nothing happened. No one asked. So he sent another wire, then another. By the end of the first quarter of 2013, he had moved $480,000 out of conservancy accounts and into the Joseph Group. By the end of the year, he was over $1.2 million. The scheme grew a second head in 2014. Smith opened another entity, William Smith and Associates LLC, through which he began paying down his personal American Express card. He would run up staggering charges on the Amex, then wire funds from conservancy accounts to William Smith and Associates, which would in turn pay Amex directly. Over the 11 years of the scheme, he would push roughly $14.9 million through that pipeline. The Amex bills were the story of his double life. Not one purchase, thousands. A 3-week Mediterranean cruise on a luxury liner. Round-trip private jet charters from Detroit to Aspen, from Detroit to Miami, from Detroit to Cabo San Lucas. Watches from Tiffany, handbags from Hermes, a jeweler's invoice for a diamond tennis bracelet exceeding $50,000. Room service at the Four Seasons Maui totaling more than $7,000. NBA courtside tickets. A $29,000 Detroit Lions private suite at Ford Field for a single Sunday afternoon game. He bought a 52-foot motor yacht and docked it at a marina outside Detroit. He leased a Maserati Ghibli and paid cash for a $200,000 Mercedes-Benz. He acquired real estate in his own name and through trusts. He opened a Detroit area nightclub, funded largely with laundered conservancy money that he treated as a personal playground. And he sent roughly $3.7 million in cash gifts and payments to a woman with whom he was having an affair. By any external measure, the Smith family lifestyle should have alarmed someone. The CFO of a mid-sized nonprofit does not, on a $200,000 salary, drive a Maserati and dock a yacht and open a nightclub and vacation on private jets. But Smith was careful. He kept the Northville house looking modest. He never brought the yacht up in board meetings. He told colleagues his father-in-law had died and left him money. He told others he had done well in early tech investments. He described the nightclub around the office as a small side hustle, a hobby project. Each lie was calibrated for its audience. The escalation was steady. Year over year, the theft grew. 12 months into the scheme, he was averaging around $100,000 a month. By 2018, it was $200,000. By 2022, the average monthly diversion had climbed above $300,000. When the numbers finally stopped, in the spring of 2024, he had moved more than $40 million in stolen funds. And the only reason it took 12 years to catch him was the smoking gun at the center of this entire case. Every month, when the bank statements arrived, Smith did not hand them to the bookkeeper as they came in the mail. He took them into his office, closed the door, and altered them. He printed clean versions on his home printer. He scrubbed out the wire transfers to the Joseph Group. He scrubbed out the payments to William Smith and Associates. He recalculated the ending balances so they matched what the accounting software expected. He handed the doctored statements to the bookkeeper, who reconciled the books against them and reported that everything balanced. It always balanced, because the CFO was cooking both sides of the equation. By early 2024, William Smith had a problem. The Conservancy was in the middle of its most ambitious construction phase yet, a project called the Ralph C. Wilson Jr. Centennial Park on the west end of the Riverwalk. The park was budgeted at more than $80 million, funded by a mix of foundation gifts, state grants, and public campaign donations. Construction was well underway. Contractors were submitting invoices. Cash was flowing out fast, and there was no cash to pay them. Smith had spent it. The accounts he had been draining for 11 years were finally, catastrophically, empty. Not empty on the books, of course. On the books, according to the bank statements Smith had handed the bookkeeper, everything looked healthy. But the real accounts, the ones he alone could see when he logged into the actual bank portal, were running below the level needed to cover the next payroll and the next contractor draw. He needed to plug the hole, so he committed one more fraud on top of the 11 years of frauds that had come before. In February of 2024, William Smith approached a Michigan bank about opening a $5 million business line of credit for the Detroit Riverfront Conservancy. He submitted board resolutions purporting to authorize the loan. He submitted corporate governance documents attesting to his authority to sign on behalf of the organization. He signed a personal guarantee page as an officer of the Conservancy. Every one of those documents was forged. The board had never approved a line of credit. There had never been a discussion of a line of credit. There had never been a vote. The chairman of the board did not know the loan existed. Smith had drafted the resolutions himself, on Conservancy letterhead, pulled from his own office, and forged the signatures of directors he saw at meetings every quarter. The bank funded the loan. Smith drew down the full $5 million and used it to backfill the Conservancy operating accounts. On the surface, everything was fine again. Payroll cleared. Contractors got paid. The park kept moving toward its grand opening, but $5 million only bought him a few months. In May 2024, the Conservancy's outside accountants, preparing to close the books for the fiscal year, requested a full set of bank statements directly from Chase, bypassing Smith's usual handoff. The request was routine. The accountants wanted to verify a few large transactions before the annual audit began. Chase sent the statements over. They did not match anything the bookkeeper had on file. The accountants opened the file, cross-referenced 2 months of transactions against what they had been given by Smith, and within 10 minutes they were looking at wire transfer after wire transfer they had never seen before, transfers to something called the Joseph Group, transfers to something called William Smith and Associates, hundreds of thousands of dollars leaving the accounts every month. They pulled a second month, then a third, then the whole year. The pattern went back further than the audit period. It went back years. The senior accountant on the engagement closed the file, walked out of her office, and called the Conservancy's board chair directly. We're heading into the investigation now, and this next part is where the sheer scale of what he did becomes impossible to look away from. If this case is hitting you the way it hit me, drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from, and subscribe if you haven't. We cover the cases the local news barely touches, and this channel doesn't let stories like this get buried. By the end of the week, the board chair had retained outside counsel. By the end of the following week, outside counsel had retained a forensic accounting firm. By the end of the month, that forensic firm had a working thesis, and the thesis was catastrophic. The CFO had stolen tens of millions of dollars. The FBI and IRS Criminal Investigation Division were notified. Federal agents opened a joint investigation. Search warrants were drafted. Grand jury subpoenas went out to Chase Bank, to American Express, to the Michigan bank that had funded the fraudulent line of credit, to the marina where the yacht was slipped, to the dealership that had leased the Maserati. The evidence came back in waves. Chase produced 11 years of bank statements, wire transfer records, and signature card documentation. The forensic accountants overlaid the actual bank records with the version Smith had handed the bookkeeper. Side by side, month after month, year after year, the alterations were undeniable. Wire transfers to the Joseph Group appeared on the real statements and vanished on the doctored versions. Wire transfers to William Smith and Associates appeared and vanished. Ending balances shifted by tens of thousands of dollars to make the falsified numbers reconcile. It was a decade of forgery, laid out in black and white. American Express produced statements going back a decade. Investigators traced private jet charters, hotel folios, jewelry purchases, cruise line bookings, and courtside seat purchases through the Amex records and back to William Smith personally. Every charge had a paper trail. Every payment on the Amex had a wire transfer behind it. Every wire transfer had come out of the Conservancy. The forged line of credit paperwork was pulled from the bank that had funded it. The signatures were compared against actual signature exemplars from the real board members. They did not match. Handwriting analysts confirmed what was already obvious. Smith had signed the names himself. Records from the marina confirmed the yacht. Records from a Detroit area title company confirmed the real estate purchases. Records from the nightclub confirmed that conservancy funds, laundered through the Joseph Group, had capitalized the business. Bank records confirmed the $3.7 million in transfers to the romantic partner. The single most damning piece of evidence, though, was not any of the big-ticket items. It was the doctored bank statements themselves. Investigators recovered original digital scans of the real Chase statements from the bank, printed copies of the doctored statements from the conservancy files, and a set of intermediate drafts recovered from Smith's home printer memory. They had the raw material, the finished forgery, and in some cases, the drafts in between. It was a documentary record of the fraud being built, month after month, from November 2012 all the way to May 2024. The forensic accountants totaled the diversions. The Joseph Group had received roughly $24.4 million. William Smith and Associates had received roughly $14.9 million. The fraudulent line of credit had brought in another $5 million that would ultimately have to be paid back by the Conservancy. The full loss figure was tallied at more than $44 million. Federal prosecutors in the Eastern District of Michigan began drafting the indictment. FBI agents arrived at the Detroit Riverfront Conservancy administrative offices on a Tuesday morning in the late spring of 2024. Smith was in his office. He had a bank statement open in front of him. He was wearing a light blue Oxford shirt, khakis, and loafers. He had gotten coffee from the break room 15 minutes earlier. He had no idea the accountants had gone around him. He had no idea the board chair had made a phone call. He had no idea the forensic firm had already reconstructed 11 years of theft down to the dollar. Two agents walked into his office. One closed the door behind them. The other set a manila folder on the desk in front of him. "Mr. Smith, I'm Special Agent Reynolds with the FBI. This is Special Agent Coleman with IRS Criminal Investigation. We need to speak with you." Smith looked at the folder. He did not open it. "What is this about?" "I think you already know what this is about, sir." "I'm not sure I do." Reynolds opened the folder. Inside was a printout of a doctored bank statement, side by side with the original from Chase. He turned it so Smith could read it. "The Joseph Group, William Smith and Associates, 12 years of wire transfers. We have the real statements. We have the ones you gave your bookkeeper. We have the drafts from your printer. We have the Amex records. We have the yacht. We have the car. We have the nightclub. We have the line of credit you forged in February. Do you want to talk to us about any of that here? Or would you prefer to talk to us with an attorney present at the federal building?" Smith did not answer immediately. He looked down at the 2 pages on his desk. He looked at the wire transfer highlighted in yellow on the real statement, and the clean line where that wire transfer used to be on the doctored version. He looked at his own handiwork. He put both hands flat on the desk. He took a long breath through his nose. "I would like to speak with an attorney." He was arrested at his desk. He was walked out through the lobby past 2 of his own staff members, one of whom had been at the Conservancy for 6 years and had never once questioned his numbers. Neither of them said a word as he passed. The indictment came down in the summer of 2024. Wire fraud, money laundering, multiple counts. The maximum exposure was decades. Smith's attorney was a veteran Detroit white-collar defense lawyer who had represented executives, doctors, and municipal officials for over 30 years. He read the evidence file. He read the forensic accounting report. He read the interviews the FBI had done with the bookkeeper, the outside accountants, the board chair, and Smith's own executive assistant. And he sat his client down and told him what every experienced defense lawyer tells a client whose case is that overwhelming. There is no defense. The only path is a guilty plea and an attempt to minimize the sentence. In November of 2024, William A. Smith pleaded guilty in federal court to wire fraud and money laundering in connection with the theft of more than $40 million from the Detroit Riverfront Conservancy. The plea agreement did not cap the sentence. It only stipulated the loss amount and the applicable sentencing guidelines. The final decision would rest with the judge. The sentencing hearing was held on April 24, 2025, before United States District Judge Susan DeClercq. The government presented victim impact statements. Board members spoke about the trust that had been broken. Donors spoke about the meaning of their gifts. A Detroit resident who had donated $100 a month for 6 years read a letter aloud about what the Riverfront was supposed to mean to her grandchildren, and what it felt like to learn that a decade of small checks had partly been converted into a private yacht. The chair of the conservancy addressed the court. She described the Kresge Match program. She described what every dollar had actually been worth to the community. She described the doctored statements, the forged loan documents, the calm face Smith had worn at board meetings for over a decade while stealing from every person in the room. Prosecutors asked for the statutory maximum. The defense asked for leniency, pointing to Smith's clean record, his cooperation with the forensic accounting reconstruction, and his acceptance of responsibility. Judge DeClercq spoke for several minutes before pronouncing sentence. Mr. Smith, you were not a person who made one bad decision. You were not a person who took one wrong step during a moment of weakness. You were a person who chose greed every single day for almost 12 years. Every morning you woke up, you decided to steal. Every night you went to bed, you had stolen. You looked at the people who trusted you, at board members, at donors, at families who wrote checks they could barely afford, and you stole from all of them, and then you altered the very documents that were supposed to catch you. You did not just steal from the Detroit Riverfront Conservancy. You stole from every family that believed in the promise of that riverfront, and you did it while smiling in their faces. She sentenced him to 228 months, 19 years, 3 years of supervised release. Restitution set at not less than $44.3 million, an amount he would never be able to repay in his lifetime. He was remanded into federal custody immediately. He was designated to a federal correctional institution in the medium security tier. His release date, at the earliest, would place him back in the free world at age 71. His wife filed for divorce within weeks of the sentencing. The yacht was seized and sold. The Maserati was returned. The Mercedes was auctioned. The nightclub was liquidated. Real estate was sold off. Every dollar the government could recover was applied against a restitution figure that dwarfed any recovery. Smith's attorney filed an appeal. The Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals reviewed the sentence and upheld it, writing that 19 years was well within the guidelines for a fraud of this magnitude, a fraud that had breached the trust of an entire city. The Detroit Riverfront Conservancy survived, but it was reshaped by the experience. The board overhauled its financial controls. Sole signatory authority was eliminated. Dual approval requirements were installed. An outside accounting firm was given direct, unmediated access to bank records with quarterly independent reconciliations. The organization publicly committed to a level of transparency that many nonprofits had never been forced to implement. Construction on the Ralph C. Wilson Jr. Centennial Park continued. The park opened to the public. Families walked the promenade. Children played on the playground. Kayakers pushed off from the launches. The Detroit River, walled off from its city for almost a century, was finally open again. Somewhere in a federal prison, William Smith was reading law library books and drafting appellate briefs by hand, a 52-year-old man with 19 years still to serve, and a $44 million debt that would follow him into whatever life remained after that. 12 years, $40 million, a doctored bank statement handed across a desk once a month, month after month, year after year, while the city built a park beside a river that its own chief financial officer was quietly draining. This case was staggering, but the one on your right-hand side is the kind of betrayal you'll be thinking about for days. Click it now.